Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to tackle the Costa Concordia disaster.
Oh, yeah. The cruise ship.
Yeah, remember, the one that capsized off the coast of Italy? So kind of like a luxury cruise ship.
A very, modern ship, too.
Yeah, and it met this really catastrophic end. So we're going to try to figure out just how that happened today. And we've got some really interesting sources lined up for this one. So we have some excerpts from Wikipedia.
Okay.
We've got a report by this NGO called Robin des Bois.
Interesting.
We have an article from a maritime safety website.
So kind of the more technical side of things.
Exactly. And we've got this really in-depth, super technical investigative report from the Spanish Ministry of Transport.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got a good mix of personal accounts and then the more technical stuff.
Yeah, so we should be able to get a pretty complete picture of this whole disaster.
Yeah.
I think what's so interesting is how this disaster raises these bigger questions about the cruise industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did.
How did we even get to these mega ships, these floating cities?
It's hard to imagine the logistics of even just getting that many people on a boat.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So the Robin des Bois report, it talks about this trend towards what they call gigantics.
Gigantics.
Yeah, cruise ships that can hold over 2,500 passengers.
How many people is that? 2,500 people. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, a huge number. And they give some examples that are just mind-blowing, like the Oasis of the Seas.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
It can hold over 6,000 passengers.
6,000. Oh, my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's almost like a small town on a boat.
Seriously, yeah.
I mean, just imagine trying to keep track of that many people, the safety and the logistics of it all.
Yeah. How do you even get everyone on and off the boat?
Right, exactly. And then if something goes wrong, I mean, how do you even
Evacuate
that many people? Yeah.
It's a little terrifying to think about.
It is. And it really makes you wonder, are the regulations even keeping pace with this, the sheer scale? These new ships are just massive.
Especially when you think about the history of, maritime disaster.
Yeah. Well, Robin des Bois actually lays out this timeline of maritime accidents and the regulatory responses going all the way back to the Titanic.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they put the Concordia in context with, a whole history of accidents.
Starting in 1912, it shows how each accident kind of leads to these new regulations. So you have the Herald of Free Enterprise, it capsized, and that led to changes for ferries.
Right.
And then you had the Scandinavian Starfire.
Oh, yeah.
And that led to improved fire safety regulations.
Okay, so step by step.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Estonia sinking.
The one in the Baltic.
Yeah, that one. And that led to improvements in stability for these large passenger ships.
It's crazy how so many lessons had to be learned.
I know. And it just makes you wonder, even with all those lessons, the Costa Concordia still happened.
Right. Something clearly wasn't working.
Exactly.
So, I mean, the big question is what exactly went wrong?
Well, that's where we kind of have to start looking closer at what happened that night.
Okay. So let's rewind back to 2012.
Yeah. January 13th, 2012. So you have the Costa Concordia, a symbol of luxury. The vacation of a lifetime.
Right, yeah. Leisure.
Yeah. It set sail off the coast of Italy, and, well, then it all goes wrong.
How? So fast.
That's what we're going to find out. The Spanish investigative report, it gives us this minute-by-minute breakdown of everything leading up to the collision. It's almost like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Okay, so it's we're right there on the bridge with them.
Yeah, and the human element is just so central to this whole story.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go, the report highlights Captain Schettino, his actions, and his communication with the Coast Guard.
Oh, right, that whole get back on board thing.
Yeah, exactly. His decisions, they played such a huge part in how this disaster unfolded. But the report, it goes beyond just blaming the captain.
Okay. So there's more to it than just one guy.
Yeah, it also reveals all these systemic issues. Things like delayed alarms, confusion about procedures, even language barriers among the crew.
Oh, wow. So a whole bunch of things that could have gone better.
Yeah, almost like a recipe for disaster.
I see what you mean. It's everyone was set up to fail in a way.
Yeah. And it makes you think, what if the crew had been better prepared for something like this? Could they have reacted more effectively?
It's a tough question, but it's an important one.
Yeah, and the report actually delves into that. It includes these what-if scenarios. They ran these flooding simulations based on the actual damage to the ship.
Wait, so they, recreated the disaster digitally?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's crazy what they found. One of the things they looked at was whether a faster evacuation could have saved more lives.
Yeah.
And it turns out even with a quicker response, the outcome might not have been that different. Like, the damage was just too much and the situation was just so chaotic.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just about getting people off the boat faster.
Right. There were just so many factors at play. And that's where this whole debate about human error versus system failure comes in.
Yeah, like, was it all the captain's fault, or were there, like, deeper issues at play?
Yeah, and the report actually points to both. It's not a simple answer.
So basically, it's complicated.
Very complicated. And it makes you wonder what could have been done to prevent something like this from happening again.
Right, like, are there things we can learn from this?
Well, that's one of the main focuses of the report. They make a bunch of recommendations for improving safety regulations, passenger information, crew training.
Okay, so they're trying to be proactive.
Yeah, but they also acknowledge that there are limits to what we can control.
I guess you can't fully eliminate human error, right?
Exactly. And that's where, like the Robin des Bois report, their concerns about gigantics become even more relevant.
Right, because when you have a ship that big, the potential for disaster is just huge. Right. It's not just about safety either. They also bring up environmental concerns, which is something we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, yeah. Like, what happens to the environment when something like this happens?
Yeah, exactly. They highlight things like waste disposal, dredging, and the impact on these marine ecosystems. Like, it's a reminder that luxury and leisure at sea, they come with unintended consequences.
So we have human error, we have systemic issues, the size of these ships, and now the environmental impact.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but I think it's really crucial to understand all of it.
It's like a puzzle with all these different pieces.
Yeah, and we're trying to put it all together to get a better understanding of this whole disaster.
To see the big picture.
Exactly. So we've kind of set the stage here. We got this massive cruise ship, in the era of gigantics, this whole history of maritime disasters, and this like looming sense that something was going to go wrong. So now let's get into like the nitty-gritty of that night.
Okay, yeah, like down to the specifics. And that's where the Spanish report really, really comes in handy. Like they go beyond just recounting what happened. They like dissect it.
Yeah.
They analyze like all the ship's data,
Yeah.
communications, even like the layout, to try to understand how this whole thing, how the events just kind of cascaded.
It's amazing how much detail they go into. Like one thing that stuck out to me was their analysis of the watertight doors.
Oh, yeah, the door.
You'd think those be like foolproof.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure. They're supposed to like seal everything off, prevent flooding from spreading.
Exactly.
But the report shows that even those like can fail.
Real
If you have a collision of this magnitude, especially with the specific damage that the Concordia sustained.
Like they weren't designed for that.
Kind of,
Hmm.
but also like the force of the impact was just a lot.
So it's not just about having the right safety features. It's about like them being able to withstand the forces of an actual disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to think about those kinds of things. And on top of that, the report highlights how the delayed alarm and the confusion among the crew, it compounded the problem. Like you need the right technology and
Yeah.
you need the human element working together.
Yeah, totally. And it makes me think about those what if simulations we talked about earlier. Like what if the crew had been trained differently? Would they have been able to react more effectively?
I don't know. It's tough to say. But the report goes into that too. They look at the role of the manning agencies.
The what?
Manning agencies. The companies that recruit and supply the crew members.
Oh, okay.
They're asking, like, were they doing a good enough job?
Yeah.
Were they screening for language proficiency,
Mm.
emergency preparedness? It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes you wonder if passengers even like have any clue about this stuff when they book a cruise.
Yeah. We just kind of assume everything is in order.
Right.
And that's why, like, the report's recommendations for improving passenger information are so important.
Yeah, so people know what to expect.
Exactly. People should know about the safety protocols, crew qualifications, everything.
Transparency is key,
Absolutely. Yeah.
especially when we're talking about something as like potentially dangerous as a cruise ship.
Totally.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another technical detail from the report. The emergency diesel generator.
The backup power, right?
Yeah. So like if the main power fails, that's supposed to kick in and keep everything running.
It's like a backup for the backup. Makes sense.
You'd think it'd be pretty reliable, right? Like especially in a situation like this.
Well,
Oh,
the report found that it was compromised.
no way.
Yeah. So they had to dig into like the technical reasons why. They analyzed data. They even conducted tests on the Concordia sister ship.
They tested another ship. Wow.
Yeah. They wanted to understand what went wrong.
What did they find?
Well, it was a few things. Physical damage to the electrical systems from the flooding, but there were also human errors and delays in the crew's response.
It's that interplay again.
Right, exactly. Technology can fail and, humans under pressure make mistakes.
It's a good reminder that even with redundancy and backups, you can still have failures.
And they can cascade.
Oh, yeah. One thing leads to another.
The report's recommendations for improved emergency power systems are pretty fascinating. They're talking about needing backups that can withstand, like, extreme damage, flooding, all that.
Well, yeah, if your emergency system can't handle an emergency, what's the point?
Exactly.
But hold on, haven't we been getting a little too technical here?
Little bit, yeah.
We need to remember the human side of this story.
Oh, for sure. This is a human tragedy, first and foremost.
Yeah. And the Wikipedia excerpts, they offer a glimpse into those personal experiences, like harrowing accounts of survival and, like, the losses.
That human cost.
What stuck out to you from those?
I mean, just the range of emotions. Passengers described the chaos, the fear, the panic as the ship started to tilt. But there are also stories of incredible courage, like crew members risking their own lives to help passengers.
And we can't forget the 32 lives that were lost.
Absolutely. And the Wikipedia entry talks about the delayed discovery of Russell Rebello's body. He was the last victim to be found.
Oh, wow.
It took years. Imagine the agony his family went through, waiting for closure.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It's a tragedy on so many levels. And it goes beyond the people on board. It impacted the island of Giglio, too, where the ship ran aground.
Oh, right.
Robin Dubois report talks about this, the damage to the ecosystem, the economic impact on the island.
These things have ripple effects.
For sure.
Okay, so we talked about the impact on the island, the passengers, the crew. But we haven't really talked about Captain Schettino.
Right.
He's kind of painted as the villain of the story, the one who abandoned ship.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot of blame.
But the Wikipedia excerpts, they offer a slightly different perspective.
Really? How so?
Some passengers actually praise the crew's efforts. They specifically mention Filipino, Colombian, and Indian crew members who worked really hard to help people evacuate.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and even the CEO of Costa Cruises at the time praised the crew and acknowledged the really difficult circumstances they faced.
It's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, because amidst all the chaos and the failure, there were still acts of heroism and dedication.
Right. It wasn't all bad.
Exactly. It's not black and white.
The Wikipedia excerpts also get into the investigation, the analysis of the data recorder, the legal proceedings against Schettino.
Yeah, like they tried to piece together what happened.
It was a huge undertaking to figure out who is responsible.
And that's where the Spanish report's deep dive, into the technical aspects is really valuable.
Yeah, they try to help us understand not just what happened, but how.
And what could have been done differently.
Exactly. And they highlight how hard it is to manage emergencies on these massive ships.
Yeah, with so many people.
Yeah, coordinating a large, multilingual crew, relying on technology, and operating within regulations that might not even be equipped to handle gigantics.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
And that makes their analysis of the ship's decision support system for the master so interesting.
The what?
It's like this system that was supposed to help the captain during an emergency,
Oh, okay.
but it failed.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The report found that they missed key steps. Communication broke down, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do.
So we have a ship that's vulnerable, a crew that's under a lot of pressure, and a system that's not working right.
Right. No wonder things went so wrong.
It really highlights how important a multi-pronged approach to safety is.
Absolutely.
We need good ship design, well-trained crews, working support systems, and a culture of safety
That's the key.
that permeates every level of the cruise industry.
It's a tall order,
It is.
but it's essential.
So we talked about the technical problems, the human errors, the systemic issues that led to the Costa Concordia disaster. But I think it's not just about pointing fingers. It's about figuring out how to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
Right, like what can we learn from this?
Yeah. And the Spanish report has all these recommendations, and they're not just like vague suggestions. They're pretty specific.
Oh, good. So they actually give concrete steps the industry can take.
Yeah, for example, they really emphasize crew training, especially when it comes to emergencies, communication, all that.
Makes sense. I mean, remember those language barriers we talked about?
Exactly. And they suggest, like, standardized language tests for all crew members, no matter where they're from.
So everyone can understand each other in a crisis. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And what about the ship itself? Like, could the design be improved?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The report talks about making those watertight compartments more robust, better emergency power systems, we talked about that,
Right.
and alarm systems that are more intuitive.
So basically making the ships themselves safer.
Yeah, like more able to handle emergencies. But it goes beyond that. They also talk about the need for a strong safety culture in the industry.
What does that even mean, like a safety culture?
It means making safety everyone's top priority, from the CEO down to the newest crew member.
Okay, so it's not just about having rules, it's
Ah.
about, like, how people think about safety.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
having clear procedures, communication, and being willing to learn from past mistakes.
Well, the report actually calls out Costa Cruises specifically for not having a strong enough safety culture.
Really?
Yeah, they point to some problems with their crisis management preparedness plan, and they say the shoreside personnel didn't act decisively enough during the disaster.
So it sounds like there were missteps at multiple levels.
Yeah, it's a reminder that safety isn't just about checking boxes and having all the right paperwork.
It's about putting those procedures into practice, making sure everyone understands them, and making sure they actually work in a real emergency.
Right. Okay, so we've got training, ship design, safety culture. What about the regulations themselves? Do those need to change?
Well, the Spanish report suggests that the current regulations, they might not be enough for these mega ships, these gigantics.
Right, because a lot of those rules were written with smaller ships in mind.
Exactly. They may not fully address the unique risks that come with these huge ships.
So it's like we're playing catch up, trying to adapt to this, rapidly changing industry.
Yeah, and the Robin de Boer report brings up another important point, the impact on the environment.
Right. It's not just about human safety, it's about protecting our oceans.
Exactly. And they call for stricter rules on waste disposal, emissions, all that.
So making cruising more sustainable.
Right. They want the industry to invest in cleaner technologies, like more efficient engines, better wastewater systems.
So they're not anti-cruising.
No, they just want it done responsibly.
Right. Balancing the economic benefits with environmental responsibility.
Exactly.
Going through all this information. I'm just struck by how complex this whole thing is.
Oh, for sure. It's not simple.
There's technology, human behavior, regulations, environmental concerns.
A lot of moving parts.
It's a lot.
It is. And that's why it's so important to do these deep dives, to break down the information, to analyze, look at different perspectives, and ultimately to learn.
Well said. And the Spanish report actually has this really powerful thought at the end. They say that the case of the Costa Concordia is considered a unique example for the lessons that may be learned.
It's true. I mean, we can learn a lot from what happened, both good and bad.
Yeah, even in the face of a disaster, there's an opportunity for growth, for improvement, for a recommitment to safety, to sustainability.
I like that.
So I guess to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what can we as individuals do to prevent something like this from happening again?
That's a good question. I think whether you're a policymaker, a shipbuilder, a crew member, a passenger, we all have a responsibility to demand better.
What do you mean?
Demand safer ships, better training, demand transparency, and a more sustainable approach to cruising.
Basically making informed choices, asking tough questions, and holding the industry accountable.
Exactly.
Because enjoying the beauty of the ocean, it shouldn't come at the cost of human life or the health of our planet.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.